Hello everyone, and thanks for attending the session. Particular thanks to Professor Charles Martin for giving up his time this evening. Just in case anybody is new to this, if you could, everybody, if you could just tick the box there just to let me know that you can hear me correctly. So just use the tick function, which is just above the main room icon there. Excellent, thank you everybody. Today's session really is going to be about going into the St. Michael's metaphor and to invite Charles to talk a little bit about his journey as a change agent in the School of Health, and also to for him to go through his iPad implementation plan. And the idea is that by going through these things, that you'll be in a position to improve your own implementation plans for your own curriculum projects. So without further ado, I'll go over to Charles and he can handle the next portion of this session. Hello everyone, my name's Charles Martin and I'm the Professor of Preclinical, St. Michael's University. In this session today, I'm just going to go through some of my journey as a change agent at St. Michael's and share the iPad implementation plan that I've got. Okay, so this slide that I hope you can all see is really a little bit about my journey as a change agent. And I guess I've used some of the projects that I guess you've been engaged with to develop my skills in being a change agent, and I've learned quite a lot along the way. And on the screen there is a little diagram which shows my journey. I started off, I guess, being unconsciously incompetent, and this was when I was going through the Essence program, and I sort of, I guess, was trying to barrel that through the School of Health at St. Michael's without really much consultation. And I guess, though, I think it's an important program, and although I was incompetent in the implementation of it, I still believe that it's necessary. So in many ways I could have been being unconsciously competent in that initial implementation. But as I progressed through to the WISE-MAP concept and started engaging your help in the process of change and asking you to help me with, you know, explaining things like constructive alignment, that really put me into another bracket. It made me more consciously incompetent. I knew where my deficits were, and if you can see the little graphic on the left-hand side there, it's really a set of books, and you know, I think that's symptomatic of the fact that I really try to leverage off literature to help me in my approach to change. And you know, a couple of people have said to me along this journey that there's a lot of reading in this unit that you're engaged in. And the way I look at it, though, is that stand on the shoulders of giants. You know, if people have gone through the similar processes that you're going through, then try and leverage off their expertise. So I think literature is really important. And thanks everybody for your input into that area of constructive alignment, because I learned quite a lot from that. The next project that I embarked upon was iPads for Tutors. And I'm going to go through that in a moment, but before I do, I just want to make the point that this is a collaborative exercise for me, and I'm hoping to get feedback from yourselves on the change processes that I've engaged with, and also on the actual iPad implementation project. So if you've got any thoughts or any insights, if you've read any literature that could add value, then please share them. And the way to do that is to use this system here, the Collaborate system, by raising your hand with the little icon there. If you raise your hand, then I'll go over to you, and you can ask your question or make your comment. Okay, so I'll just quickly go through my iPad for Tutors project then. And now, if this is not particularly clear to you on the screen, then I suggest that you go to the icon at the top and use the I think it's the view. Sorry, all right, so there's an icon at the top of the whiteboard, and it allows, I think, every individual to change the resolution, and I've just gone to 100% there to make it a little bit clearer to me. I'm not sure on whether that shows on your screens, but if you can't see that, then just change your own resolution to 100%. Now, I thought originally that I was just going to go through and show my really well thought out iPad implementation plan. But we've actually had this plan in place now for about 3 months, and it seemed a more useful exercise to me to have a reflection about how that has actually played out in our organization. And so I'll just go through some of the key issues that I've reflected upon. Now, the first is the rationale that we had for originally developing this iPad implementation plan is still a strong rationale for us. We still believe in it. We still want to do it. But when I look at some of the implementation issues, communication has been a real problem for us. And I think we really needed to get on top of communication right from the start and really develop a communication plan, which probably would have included a project website, a communication hub, ways in which people that are involved in the project can actually engage with us. Now, just before going on to the plan in more detail, I'll just quickly show you a slide here, which really is all about the themes, the key themes that I've come up with in relation to the implementation plan. And these themes, I think, really transcend the iPad project, and they might be useful for you to have a think about for your own implementation projects. So communication, leadership, and support, they're the 3 things that really have stood out to me as being things that we really need to improve upon. Okay, so as we move along to the next section, the expected outcomes, the outcomes, again, are still desirable, they're still dear to us, but the barriers that we have had to confront have been a lot more significant than we first thought. And I'll just touch on some of those barriers now. Now, while we had real support for the project and we identified a couple of barriers like costs of technology and issues about moving from paper-based to online, we found that there was a lot more barriers than we anticipated. And really, what we should have done in retrospect was to recast the notion of barriers into some form of risk management approach, whereby we identified barriers and then proposed possible solutions for these barriers. For example, time. Time has emerged as a real issue for us. Our tutors on the campus here at St. Michael's are only here for 30 minutes before their teaching commitments start, and there is really limited time to introduce a significant curriculum initiative like iPads. There's a wide disparity in their skills. Some are really proficient at the use of iPads. Others, it's the first time they've actually had access to such a learning machine. The Wi-Fi is reputedly not strong in certain areas, and some of our staff have actually lost confidence in that. So they suggest that they would not want to use their device because of the poor Wi-Fi. There's some that are wedded to current practices and unwilling to move away from a paper-based model. And there's also other agendas that have been confused with our iPad implementation projects, for example, an e-portfolio initiative and a recording attendance initiative. So I think the main issue that I really wanted to highlight here was that it's all very well identifying barriers, but I think to actually to put them in a more risk management context and to propose solutions to barriers is probably more valuable in your implementation plan. Okay, the next major issue for us was in terms of leadership, and we had tacit support from our senior executive here at St. Michael's, and I noticed that a number of you have put leadership down as an issue in your implementation plans. However, I think leadership is more than just going to a committee meeting and saying that you really support something and want it to happen. I think leadership has got to be a lot more visible from the top, from middle managers, from project implementation teams, etc. So there needs to be some level of accountability in leadership as well. It's not just a question of waving the flag at a meeting and saying, yes, it's a good idea. So if you're thinking about leadership being important in your own implementation plan, I think it would be a good idea to put some accountability next to those leadership initiatives that you might want to implement. There's only another page and a half of this, so I'll just quickly go through the others, other issues. You know, almost touching on the point that I made earlier about, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants. The notion of leveraging off literature. There was a fair amount of misinformation about our iPad initiative, about the fact that, you know, other universities tried it and it was a disaster, you know, and I think it's really important to try and leverage off published referee literature that might actually help your cause, rather than just leave it in a bit of a void and allow for individuals to come up with anecdotal remarks about, you know, the extent to which something is a good idea or not. And so in retrospect, we should have integrated some form of literature into our communication hub. In terms of the teaching and learning, I think we needed to make the point to our participants in our initiative that this isn't just something that's going to happen overnight, that it's a significant change and it could take a while to implement, and it's going to be a change that could take anything up to 2 years, maybe even 3, to get fully embedded into the fabric of our university. And to provide some kind of ongoing support for that initiative in terms of you know, professional development, in terms of allowing people to get to know software, in terms of even putting in place things like a buddy system to help individuals who might be struggling with the new ideas. Okay, finally, and this is one that we probably haven't solved, but again, it should be part of a risk management type of approach, whereby we've identified that, you know, the IT support is one thing that is really required at our university, and the university is not really supporting mobile devices and Apple products at this point in time, and so it's really just fallen onto champions or admin staff to be able to actually provide that IT support, and it's really not been particularly useful. So we need a more sophisticated approach. And finally, just in terms of our evaluation, again, evaluation is a really important part of any implementation initiative. We needed to be a little bit more proactive in getting our evaluation plan right online, right from day one, to ensure that we could generate feedback from our users that would actually help to reshape, re-energize the project in an ongoing way. And so the idea of an evaluation being formative, helping the implementation rather than being something that we just do at the end to ensure that it was a good idea to implement something in the first place. So we just needed to be a little bit more proactive in our evaluation strategy. So in summary, my reflection on our implementation is, don't use these words flippantly. Don't say that communication is important and then not put a serious plan in to actually integrate communication into the implementation. I put effort into developing a communication strategy, developing a hub, frame the whole project, the curriculum development project, as a community of practice rather than something that is just being imposed from either a champion or from above. The leadership area, I'd say encourage, but I really mean require leaders to be accountable. Again, it's one of those terms that gets bandied around quite a lot. We need leadership in a project, but leaders need to be accountable and they need to be visible, championing the curriculum development project. Going around, walking around, asking participants how successful the implementation actually is, taking an interest. And finally, the support needs to be ongoing. It needs to be in terms of professional development. It needs to be in terms of resources, appropriate levels of Wi-Fi, and that should be informed by the evaluation. Okay. So they're the key themes: communication, leadership, support. Now I just want to go over to you for a while, and that is to think about how these learnings, I guess, from my journey could actually impact upon your own implementation plan. And I'll ask the question: is there any literature that you would like to share with others? Is there any insights that you've learned from your planning out your own implementation plan so far that you would like to share with others? So I'll close there and just go back to Frank. Well, thank you there. Sorry about that. I just needed to make sure that Professor Martin wasn't in my room anymore. Okay, that was his reflection on an implementation plan that he put into place. It's a real implementation plan. So can I just go over to the floor for any comments or feedback that you might have for Professor Martin? Andy, over to you first.
Yep. Hi, Frank. Yeah, I'd like to thank Professor Martin for putting in an appearance. It was lovely to finally meet him. I really liked his consideration of the barriers around implementation and the thought of sort of recasting those as a risk management sort of idea. I really like that, trying to spot what was potentially going to get in your way and then
Sorry, Andy, we seem to have lost you there. Do you want to try again?
Yep. Did you get any of that?
You were just saying that you liked the way in which he was going down a risk management approach, and then I lost you after that.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty much, rather than thinking of barriers as barriers, thinking of them as problems that require solutions as part of your plan. I thought that was a really nice way of approaching it.
Andy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you give us an example of a barrier that you might have in your own implementation and some form of solution, just as in the way of an example?
Yeah, so for everyone, my implementation, well, my project is trying to introduce some kind of central venous catheter insertion training into the new hospital that I work in. So it's trying to get a lot of different people from a lot of different departments to all come together and agree on a standardized training. So I think that's my biggest barrier, is getting a lot of knowledgeable and experienced people to all agree on one way of doing something that has several ways of doing it. As part of my implementation plan, I think I've addressed that by trying to have as many open communication lines as possible. So by starting it with a sit-down sort of committee meeting to get everyone's ideas, and then ongoing email trail thus far, and certain face-to-face meetings to try and get everyone's points of view and get everyone to see how relevant other people's points of view can be as well. So I'm kind of more of a mediator than a leader at the moment, it seems. But that's been my...
Thank you very much, Andy. Now, has anybody else got any feedback for Professor Martin, particularly in terms of his three themes of communication, leadership, and the ongoing support? Do those resonate with you? Natalie.
Yeah, I actually like his topics, and certainly in terms of leadership, I think, communication is a big issue and so on, but I think for me leadership is a big deal in that I'm actually not running a department and I'm going to have to face this issue in some manner. So yeah, I missed his comments on leadership, but I noticed you had some notes. I was going to go back and review those.
Yeah, well, certainly this will be taped, Natalie, so that you can review this, all of the slides at your leisure after this session. I think leadership is a really important issue, and I think the notion of, if you want people to support you, then I guess you need to ask them to be visible and to take an active interest, and to sort of walk the walk and talk the talk, actually. I know that leaders are sometimes very busy and they've got other priorities, but if this project is important to them and to you, then I guess time needs to be made to do that. And it makes such a difference if a leader, if a dean of a school might walk into a teaching forum, for example, and say, how's this going? It's really important to me that this is a success. Everybody then will, typically will fall behind the initiative. Anybody else got a comment on leadership? Heidi.
I thank you, Frank, and also for I can't remember the chap's name, but the iPad guy. I thought it was really interesting, your comments about the support being visible from leaders that you might draw into your project. My my larger project is to do with clinic. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, no problem, Heidi.
Sorry, I've got my iPhone and my computer going. I was having a lot of trouble with the sound. My project is about clinical deterioration and trying to create a video resource in the that spans both the hospital and the university settings. And one of the people that is drawn into that is our Associate Dean at the campus, who is based clinically as well as in the university. And one of the comments that you made about requiring accountability I found interesting, but I wanted to ask how your avatar is considering to do that, because in our project we've got some deliverables, but they're part of the main project and to do with creating this resource and expressing the process that we use to create it. But the involvement of our Associate Dean is really to act as a champion and to liaise firstly up with the Dean and the executive team, secondly with our clinicians and our executives at hospital level in different hospitals that he works at. So really we're asking him to be supportive, which he is, and has been to a meeting and introduced me to talk about it with a number of key players. But beyond that, I'm not sure whether you're suggesting that that's not enough.
Okay, good question, Heidi. Before I sort of try to answer that, I noticed that Nicole had her hand up, so maybe we'll just go to Nicole first.
Oh, sorry, Frank. I was just thinking along the lines of the communication that you were talking about and how Professor Charles, recognised that current practices, and that's where I'm running into problems with resistance of the people working clinically, that I'm trying to implement a change, and some of them still want to do it their own way. So it's proving to be quite a challenge.
Yes, well, I think Professor Martin is having that very challenge as well, and I guess that's where you've got to leverage off the leadership of the university or in the clinical setting to really drive through the change a little bit harder. And I think I don't know what other people think, but just to attempt to answer Heidi's question about, what do you do if you get this sort of leadership that's not quite visible enough. I think the first thing to do is to ask the leader to step up to the plate, and it's really how you do it. I think it's almost like massaging someone's ego to say, look, you're really needed here. That we need your support. We need you to be visible in the project. Everybody will get behind this if you're going to be a champion of it. And I find in most cases, if you did say that to somebody, a senior manager, I think they would be actually quite happy to come and support it if they were genuine about the project. And I don't know if you really need much beyond that. You don't expect leaders to be in hands-on sort of problem-solving positions, but just to be visible and engaging with people about the project is sometimes enough. What do other people think? Yes, Natalie?
To me, I know it's communicating, but I see that as the same issue as leadership. If I can get that support from above, and I think with Nicole as well, that if you do have that support, I think that's your battle with communication as well.
Yes, agreed. So, sometimes it's easier said than done, and some people are fairly entrenched in an existing way of doing things, and they might need a lot of help, and it might take a lot of time. And in fact, ultimately, if they're not accepting of the change, it might mean that they probably need to move on from that organisation. That might be the end game. But I guess to get a good leadership strategy so that people are visible, and to have a communication, really smooth communication lines is really important. And I think if I was looking at the IPAD implementation plan, that's one of the issues with that. It was the communication was, yes, there's people there if you need them, but there was never a sense of really encouraging people to in fact share their ideas, whether they be positive towards a project or negative or whatever, in one central place. So there's not this business of whispers coming from different parts of the organisation as to whether it's being successful or not. Christine.
Yeah. In regards to what are the current practices, effective or are they ineffective, and actual buying those up in the hierarchy.
Sorry, Christine, your audio was really a little bit problematic there for me, so I didn't really catch a lot of that. It might be an idea to actually just use the chat pane down at the bottom, just to make the point, if you can, by using the chat pane, and then we can maybe deconstruct it a little bit. Okay, now one other issue that I wanted to raise was the nature of the innovation and how complex or otherwise it is. And I've read through all of your implementation plans, the drafts, and a lot of the projects seem to be reasonably small scale, just involving one or two people at most. And one of Professor Martin's comments was, change is going to take a while, and it could be, anything up to 2 or 3 years to implement something like an IPAD implementation project. For those people that have got small-scale projects, are there another set of issues associated with your implementation? Leadership, communication, and the ongoing nature of support were important to bigger projects, but for those with smaller projects, what were the main issues for you? I don't know whether, Gavin, you're set up for a microphone, but would you like to comment on that one? Because I know that your project is just really involves yourself and looking at 2 different types of delivery methods. Maybe Gavin's not audio connected, so if you can hear Gavin, it would be great if you could just put a couple of points down in the chat area. I know that, Natalie, I know that you've already said a couple of things, but your project as well is quite an interesting one, given that you're working with the Flying Docks service and you're implementing something in an enclosed and loud space. Do those sort of change management issues affect you, or is this just something that you've got to do with the resources that you've got?
I can I have scope to make it bigger, and I'm starting small with just our base, because obviously there's small bases, and seeing the support I get here, which has actually been quite positive. And I think, later on, perhaps if it's taken up by learning and development, it could grow so that the one idea can, bring in and introduce other topics as well. So it might actually be a conception of something big, or it might just stay small. But I've not yet met any resistance which I was anticipating.
I think that's an interesting point, Natalie, that, you know, in fact I've seen this with a lot of the project ideas, is that they're more or less proofs of concept. It's almost like, here's an idea for a small area, and they've all got potential, or many of them have got potential to be replicated across other areas. Tamara, I don't know whether you can hear over there in Kalgoorlie, but again, I think you're situated in a clinical context, and you have an idea to implement, I think, incontinence training in your hospital. How much support have you got in the hospital setting?
I think I'll be very quick here. As I said, I'm in a therapy session with my daughter. I managed to gain the support of the managers. I try to involve them in the whole implementation of the continence issues. I had to identify some issues on the various wards and how it can affect the whole hospital. So everybody was more or less interested, and yeah, I've got support so far. But my thing is, I'm hoping that I have the continued support from everybody.
Thank you, Tamara. And just a contribution from Susanna. Susanna's got a project in the emergency department. How easy or otherwise was it for you to generate support for that, Susanna?
Yeah, hi everybody. My project is probably comparatively boring because it's just implementing or just introducing some new topic in our already existing teaching scheme or teaching roster for our junior staff in emergency department. And well, it turns out that as soon as you put your hand up to do some extra bits, everybody is actually quite happy for you to do it, because it might, I was first thinking there might be competing sort of interest in terms of that other people had other curricular topics that they might find more important or compete for time or so. But it turns out that there's quite a lot of support, because everybody is happy if somebody puts their hand up and wants to do something, wants to add on something into the already existing program.
Thanks, Susanna. And is it possible just to tell us a little bit about what you're planning to actually do in the emergency department, and what sort of technologies, etc., you're going to use?
Okay, well, it's a very, it's probably one of the most exciting projects. It's quite low key. It's basically, there was quite a bit of demand recently from the side of the junior doctors, as well as from the side of the consultant, to educate our junior staff more about implementing pain management better, and particularly earlier in AD. And that seems to be all an easy thing for people who've worked there for a long time, but for the new guys, it turns out it's quite a barrier for them. The project itself is probably not that exciting, because it's just going to be another teaching session, which I try to do as interactive as possible, and I'm going to add on to that like lots of different cases that they have to solve. And there is a supportive material for them to take home, and we're actually going to do a couple of weeks later another session to see how much they actually retained in terms of their memory, but also how well they feel that they did in implementing the changes. And there's going to be some evaluation from the participants, and as well as from some peer observers.
That sounds good, Suzanne, and I don't think it's boring. I think anything that is looking at things through a fresh lens in terms of constructive alignment is anything but boring. Catherine, I don't think we've heard from you yet. What's your project all about, and and what are the barriers that you've encountered so far?
My project is the IV cannulation and trying to move people from attending the workshop to actually becoming confident to insert cannulas in the clinical setting. So I'm looking at the Peyton's 4-step approach to competency. So what we're making our workshop a little bit more interactive, and then we're setting up more learning support in the clinical setting, hopefully, to give people the confidence, I guess, to start cannulating, because what we find is people attend the workshop and give lovely evaluations, but we haven't seen a change in practice in the number of nurses actually inserting cannulas. So we've also been looking at trying to provide more opportunities rather than having to put your first cannula in with an acutely unwell patient. We're developing, or I'm developing, partnerships with the anaesthetists to try and go to the patients preoperatively. So we've actually got a more controlled environment for the learning to occur. So that's basically what my approach has been. I do find that as far as leadership goes, everybody says it's an issue that needs to be solved. But when you address the issue, all the people seem to disappear. All your supporters disappear. So you're kind of left standing there going, what exactly do you want if you don't give me any resources to work with? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a huge issue, and sometimes you know, the innovators are left feeling like they're the meat in the sandwich, or facing a barrage of resistance, and with no one really standing next to them. Now, I apologise if your project isn't the right one for this comment, Catherine, but I have actually read through about 24 of them in the last 2 days, so it's quite difficult to sort of hold them all in my mind. But one project in particular, I think, is looking at working with a third party, and in fact I think it's West Coast College of TAFE, and that particular organisation is being part of the implementation. How have you found working, if it is you? If it's not you, then hopefully the person who is involved in that project is here. How have you found that implementation, working with a third party, relying on somebody else to be part of it?
I wish it was me, Frank, but I'm sorry it's not. I'm kind of alone.
Okay, it looks like the person that has got that partnership initiative going isn't here, so we're probably not going to hear from that perspective. Gavin, I'm not sure whether you've got a mic, but I'm just trying to read through your comment in the chat.
I do have a mic now. My screen went into screensaver mode and completely locked me out. So I was listening to you and unable to make any comments whatsoever. Anyway, I managed to force the machine to do what I want, and now I can talk to you. So you've got through to the comments. Basically, it's what I think is fairly minor, but my students, when I get them to show me how you would report a chest X-ray, they're going through an A, B, C, D, E thing, and about fourth letter they stall and start obviously thinking really hard, decoding where they are in an acronym. I was never taught that way. I go way back. I don't know where it's come from. I'm still trying to source that, but my other life is in rescue helicopter type work, and I've done, I've been fully briefed in what it means to be cognitively overloaded and not do that to yourself. I'm going to put an article into the system in a second that summarises some of those ideas. But it's clear to me that my students, who are going to be interns next year, are spending most of their mental processing pulling the acronym out of the air, working out what it is that they've got to say here, and then going back to the X-ray and then using what's left of their brain to interpret the X-ray. and that seemed wrong. And I thought, well, maybe there's a better way. And my theory is that the way to prompt yourself from one part of the dissertation, this is a chest X-ray, yada yada yada, is to go from this part of the picture to that part of the picture, moving from one adjacent area to the next adjacent area, making your comments as you move across the topography of the picture. So basically the picture itself becomes the prompting aid for the sequence, and that removes a whole lot of decoding from what you're trying to do. It results the same. You end up with a fully reported chest X-ray, and you've done all the regions. You just haven't had to decode an acronym to get there. So that's my little project. It seems pretty trivial in one respect, but having gone through the first part of this process, I guess it's getting a little bit bigger.
That sounds good, Gavin, and thanks for sharing that with us. I guess the one question I would have about it is the impetus for change. Is that coming from the students, that they're not getting this the correct method of actually interpreting a chest X-ray? Are their marks being typically lower than in other areas, or is it something that just comes from your own gut feeling that something's wrong?
Oh no, it's an observation of distress. I mean, I only get one student at a time in a clinical setting, and I know one of the set piece things they're going to be put through as an intern junior doctor is present this X-ray, and their seniors and bosses will be judging them. It's also a set piece medical final year exam. Here's an X-ray, tell me about it. So they've been drilled in how to do it, and and what I'm watching is I'm sort of saying, well, okay, here's an X-ray, do it. And some of them are just absolutely stalling and stammering, and the observation is that it's the acronym that's killing them, not the knowledge. That was the impetus. I don't know if the marks are showing up anywhere. That's not been assessed, but not all students struggle this way. But it just seems that when I put a couple of students to the idea, well, okay, why don't you do it this way and give it a couple of practices and tell me how it goes? They said, no, that's a much better system. That really makes it easier. So I thought, okay, maybe since you're asking me to come up with some sort of project, maybe that's my project, and here I am.
That sounds great, and I think those comparison between different teaching methods, I think they need to be shared widely in the literature as well, because if you determine something significant here, that the learning is much more deeper and less stressful, then I think that could be shared with others, because why would we continue with an acronym method if it's really just not being a useful way to learn, and we're just doing it because of historical reasons.
Acronyms are sold at about $500 to $600 each. You go to do a course, it costs you $3,000, you get 4 letters rearranged. They're very popular.
Okay, thanks for that contribution, Gavin. I think the time is marching on, so I just wanted to finish this session with where to from here. Now because you all got your implementation plans into me, what I'm going to do tomorrow is give you feedback and put that back into Blackboard. Now you might note from one of the postings that I made on the announcements that the due date for the assessment for the summative, which is basically your implementation plan, the final version, is actually been put back to next Thursday. So really you've got between now and next Thursday to consider any feedback that I give, and I'll just say up front, it's not going to be fabulous feedback because I really just had to get through them really quickly. I just made some brief notes on each one of them, so I'll just get that to you tomorrow. But also to consider what Professor Martin said in his reflections of his implementation plan, because I think you can learn quite a lot from from just looking at you know, his reflection. And so look at your own plans and maybe try and draw out some themes yourself about, you know, what are the key issues here, and really make yourself really accountable for developing those themes and really putting in place strategies and risk management approaches so that you've covered all bases, so that when you put in your plan you say, this is watertight, I can stand by this, I've envisioned all the things that can possibly go wrong, and you know, I know that's sometimes very difficult to do, and you know, it's probably impossible anyway, but you're doing your best to do that, and you're putting in some strategies to ameliorate those things that can go wrong. So from a nuts and bolts perspective, you'll get feedback tomorrow. Use the implementation plan that Professor Martin put together. Don't be wedded to your own method of constructing it as it currently stands. You know, if you think, oh look, Professor Martin's way, his categories were better, or I've seen something else in the literature that's better, you don't need to stick with your formative version of this. The whole point of the formative is that you improve as a result of it. Has anybody got any questions about this, about the you know, the submission of your implementation plans?
I thought Professor Martin's plan was very good, and I probably will be going back to the drawing board, I think.
That was Nicole, I think. Yeah, look, yeah, don't be too hasty in throwing out your own ideas. Probably wait for a little bit of feedback from me tomorrow, and then make your judgments on that. But you know, I think one of the things that probably, just from a generic point of view, that was probably a little bit lacking in most of the implementation plans that were submitted, I think probably you need more detail on, you know, who's doing what, timeframes, responsibilities, you know, those types of things that, you know, they're the sort of meat of an implementation plan. There was I think there was quite a lot of prose in your plans, and you know, maybe it's better just to do it in short, sharp, tabular form. You know, here's the heading, who's responsible, this is what's going to happen, these are the things that possibly can go wrong, these are my strategies to ameliorate that, and you know, it's really fairly clear. If anybody else has got, Christine, I know you've got your hand up at the moment, but I think you've had your hand up for most of the session, so if you just click the raise hand icon again, your hand goes away. Brilliant. All right, look, has anybody else got any comments before we close? I think we're going to probably close a couple of minutes early tonight. No, that's fantastic. So essentially, we're almost there. Next Thursday is the due date for the implementation plan. If you haven't already gone into Blackboard to have a look at the personal journal icon, I'd really encourage you to do that now and start making some reflections on this process. Even after today's session, you could reflect on, you know, what your thoughts and feelings were about your implementation plan in the light of what you might have picked up in tonight's session. So go into that. I know I've been into that already, and at least half of you have already started your journals. If you haven't already started, go in and kick that off, because that's you know, covering the basis for the final assessment, which is the, you know, reflection about the implementation. Has anybody got any questions at all, or any ambiguity about the personal journaling side of things? No? So that's fantastic. Thank you all for your participation tonight. It's been a really good session. I've enjoyed hearing from you. Special thanks to Professor Charles Martin for his fabulous contribution in the iPad implementation plan. And we'll look forward to, I think there's only one more Collaborate session, but I'll certainly look forward to engaging with you all online. So good night everyone, and thanks for attending.